Long ago, the world was very different from the world we know today. It was a time when people forgot about being kind and good to each other. Instead, they chose to be selfish and mean, making the world a sad and dark place. Up above, watching over everything, was God. He saw how bad things had gotten and felt deeply saddened. But amidst all this, there was one man who was different. His name was Noah. Noah was not like the others. He was kind, he cared for his family, and he always tried to do what was right. Because of his goodness, God noticed him. One day, God spoke to Noah. He told Noah about the big plan to wash the world clean with a great flood. But because Noah was good, God wanted to keep him and his family safe. God gave Noah a special task, to build a huge boat called an ark. This wasn't just any boat, it was to be big enough to hold Noah's family and two of every kind of animal in the world. Noah got to work, even though the people around him couldn't understand why. They laughed at him, thinking he was silly. But Noah didn't mind. He trusted God and kept building the ark, plank by plank. After the ark was built, something amazing happened. Animals started arriving in pairs. Lions, elephants, giraffes, and even tiny insects all lined up to board the ark. Just as God had said, it was two of every kind of animal in the world. Noah and his family helped them find their places inside, making sure that all the animals were comfortable. It was a beautiful sight, all the different animals living together peacefully. Then the skies began to darken and the first drops of rain started to fall. It rained like it had never rained before. Water poured from the sky day and night for 40 days and 40 nights. As the rain poured down and the waters climbed higher, entire cities and all the people in them disappeared beneath the waves, leaving nothing behind. Inside the ark, Noah, his family, and all the animals were safe and dry. They could hear the rain and the storm, but they stayed together, waiting for the moment they could come out again. Finally, the rain stopped, but the earth was still covered with water. Noah needed to find out if it was safe to leave the ark. He sent out a raven, but it came back, finding nowhere to land. Then he sent out a dove, which also returned. Noah waited a bit longer and sent the dove out again. This time, it brought back an olive leaf, which meant that the waters were receding and life was starting to grow again. Soon the ark came to rest on a mountaintop. The earth was finally dry enough for them to leave their big wooden home. Noah, together with his family and all the animals, opened the door of the ark and stepped out onto the soft, muddy ground. They stretched their legs and took deep breaths of fresh air. The world looked clean and new, like a blank page waiting to be filled with stories. Flowers started to bloom, and trees began to grow tall and green again. As Noah and his family stood on the fresh earth, God spoke to Noah again. He made a very special promise. God promised that he would never send a flood to cover the whole earth again. And as a sign of this promise, he put a rainbow in the sky. It was bright and colorful, a reminder of God's love for every living creature. In the Bible, there were two cities called Sodom and Gomorrah. These cities were filled with people who made very bad choices and didn't listen to anyone, not even God. God saw what was happening and was very sad. He decided that he couldn't let it go on anymore. But there was one good man named Lot who lived in Sodom with his family. God didn't want to hurt Lot because Lot always tried to do what was right. So God sent two angels disguised as men to Sodom. They went to Lot's house. Lot saw them and invited them in, being kind and hospitable. He didn't know they were angels at first, but he wanted to make sure they were safe in his city. But the people of Sodom saw these strangers and wanted to harm them. They surrounded Lot's house and demanded Lot to send the strangers out. Lot tried to protect his guests, showing he was a good man. They told him, "You need to leave this city with your family because God is going to destroy it for being so wicked." The angels told Lot to take his wife and two daughters and warned them to not look back once they left. God was going to rain down fire and brimstone from the sky to cleanse the land of all evil. So Lot and his family ran away in the middle of the night. They ran as fast as they could, away from the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Behind them, the sky lit up as fire fell, burning everything in those cities to the ground. It was like a giant fiery storm wiping away all the wrongdoings. Lot's wife, however, made a big mistake. Even though the angels told her not to, she looked back to see what was happening to the city. And because she didn't listen, she turned into a pillar of salt, stuck there forever. Lot and his daughters kept going, safe because they listened to the warning. They remembered not to look back and lived on, remembering the lesson of what happens when people choose not to do what's right. They learned the consequences of bad choices and the importance of listening and following guidance, especially when it comes from God. Once upon a time, there was a huge city named Babylon. It was known for its incredibly strong walls and beautiful hanging gardens. It was one of the greatest cities of ancient times. Babylon was like the heart of everything important: money, power, and culture. The king of Babylon was very proud and thought his city could never be beaten, claiming it was the best city ever made. People in Babylon didn't care much about being fair or kind anymore. They were more into worshipping statues and other things rather than remembering the real God who created everything. God tried to warn them through messengers, saying that bad times were coming, but nobody in Babylon paid any attention. They thought they were too safe behind their massive walls and with all their treasures. But God wanted to prove that no place, no matter how strong or rich, could ignore him and get away with it. The warning became real during the reign of King Belshazzar at a big party in the king's palace. Suddenly, a hand appeared out of nowhere and wrote a strange message on the wall of the palace. The message was confusing to everyone, and not even the smartest people in the palace could figure it out. Then the queen remembered Daniel, a wise man who followed God and could understand dreams and signs. Daniel came and looked at the strange message on the wall. He told them the writing was a message from God, saying the king had failed to be good, and as a result, Babylon would be conquered and taken over by others. Just like Daniel said, that very night, something unexpected happened. The army of the Persians, led by King Cyrus, made a sneaky attack. They cleverly dammed the river that flowed under Babylon's walls and sneaked into the city where the river used to flow. Because everyone was busy partying, they didn't even guard the gates. So Babylon was captured without much resistance. Babylon's fall happened quickly and took everyone by surprise. It was the end of Babylon's time, sending a strong message that being too proud and not listening to God leads to disaster. Once upon a time, after a big flood had washed the earth clean, people everywhere spoke the same language. They found a nice flat land in a place called Shinar and decided to settle there. Imagine everyone being neighbors, understanding each other perfectly, like one big family. One day, the people had a big idea. Let's build a city with a tower that reaches up to the sky. It'll be so tall it'll touch the clouds, they said, excited to start. They used bricks instead of stones and sticky tar for glue. Everyone worked together, passing bricks and mixing tar, laughing and dreaming about their sky-high tower. But then, something unexpected happened. God looked down from heaven and saw the city and the tall tower. Look at them, all speaking the same language, working together on this big project. If they can do this, they'll think they can do anything. They're forgetting that some things are meant for God alone. So, God decided to mix things up a bit. Suddenly, when one person asked for a brick, another handed them a shovel. When someone needed more tar, they got a bucket of water instead. It was like everyone had started speaking in riddles. Confused and frustrated, they couldn't work together anymore. The tower that was supposed to reach the sky was left unfinished. Because they couldn't understand each other, people started to drift apart, forming smaller groups with those they could communicate with. These groups traveled far and wide, finding new places to live. The big family was scattered across the earth, each group speaking its own new language. They traveled far, to places where no one had lived before. Each group found new lands with mountains, rivers, and forests. They built new homes, using what they had learned, but this time, they respected their limits. The world was filled with a rainbow of languages, each as beautiful and complex as the next. In these new lands, people's lives took on new colors and shapes. They dressed in different clothes, sang different songs, and told different stories under the stars. Children grew up learning how to say hello and I love you in their own special language. They learned from the land and the animals, and they celebrated the seasons in their own ways. In the end, the story of the Tower of Babel shows us that it's important to remember we're not all powerful and that God has plans we might not understand. God made us all different, with many languages and ways of living, making the world a more interesting place. When we learn to listen and understand each other, we make not just buildings, but friendships that God smiles upon. A long, long time ago, after Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt and through the Red Sea, they traveled through the desert to a place called Mount Sinai. God had saved them from slavery, and now he wanted to give them special rules to live by, rules that would help them be good to each other and stay close to him. Moses climbed up the tall, rocky Mount Sinai all alone. The mountain was covered in thick clouds, and there was thunder and lightning. It was a bit scary, but Moses knew it was important. God himself was going to speak to him there. God talked to Moses on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. He told Moses 10 very important rules, which became known as the 10 Commandments. These weren't just any rules. They were God's way of showing the people how to live peacefully with each other and be faithful to him. When Moses came down from the mountain, he brought 2 stone tablets with him. The commandments were written on these tablets so everyone could remember them. The commandments said, "You shall have no other gods before me." This meant that the Israelites should only worship the one true God. "You shall not make for yourself an idol," which meant God didn't want the people to worship statues or images as if they were gods. "You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God." God meant that they were to speak God's name with respect, not carelessly. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. He wanted one day a week for them to rest and think about God, just like God rested on the 7th day when he created the world. Honor your father and your mother. This meant they should respect and take care of their parents. You shall not murder, which meant life is precious, and they were to protect each other. You shall not commit adultery. God wanted husbands and wives to be faithful to each other. You shall not steal, which meant taking something that isn't yours is wrong. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. This meant telling lies about others is harmful. You shall not covet, which means not to be jealous of what others have. The people promised to follow these commandments, and Moses helped them learn what each one meant. The 10 Commandments were a gift to help the Israelites understand right from wrong. They were rules to live by that would keep them safe and happy. After wandering in the desert for 40 years, the Israelites, led by Joshua, were finally entering the Promised Land. But there was a big obstacle in their way: the fortified city of Jericho, a city with walls so strong and high that no army could easily defeat it. God had a plan for how the Israelites would conquer Jericho, and it was unlike any battle plan ever devised. God told Joshua to have the armed men march around the city once a day for 6 days. They were to be followed by 7 priests carrying trumpets made from ram's horns, and the Ark of the Covenant, a sacred chest that represented God's presence among them. Then, on the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times. At Joshua's command, after the 7th lap, the priests were to blow their trumpets, and all the people were to shout as loud as they could. Joshua and the Israelites did exactly as God instructed. The people of Jericho were watching as the Israelites circled their city once a day, quietly except for the sound of the trumpets. They were confused and even amused by such an unusual military strategy. Finally, the 7th day arrived. The Israelites got up at dawn and marched around the city, not once, but 7 times. The anticipation grew with each lap. Then, when Joshua gave the signal, The priests blew their trumpets, and the people shouted with all their might. And something incredible happened. The walls of Jericho fell down flat. The Israelites charged straight into the city and captured it, just as God had promised. A long time ago, in the land where Jesus was born, there ruled a king named Herod. King Herod was known for his magnificent buildings and cities, but he was also known for something not so grand: his fear of losing his power. When Jesus was born in Bethlehem, a bright star appeared in the sky. Wise men from the east saw this star and knew it meant that a new king, the King of Kings, had been born. They wanted to find and worship this new king, so they traveled to Jerusalem and started looking for him. When King Herod heard this, he was very troubled. Herod didn't want anyone to take his place as king, so he called together all the chief priests and asked them where the Messiah was born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea." King Herod secretly called the wise men to find out exactly when the star had appeared. He told them to find the child and report back to him, so that he too could worship him. But Herod didn't really want to worship the new king. He wanted to get rid of him. The wise men went on their way. They followed the star until it stopped over a stable, a house where the animals slept. When they saw Jesus with his mother, Mary, they bowed down and worshipped him. They also gave Jesus gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But when it was time to go back to King Herod, they were warned in a dream not to return to him, so they went back to their country by another path. When Herod realized that the wise men had tricked him, he was furious. He gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under. This terrible act showed just how far Herod would go to protect his throne. However, God protected Jesus from Herod's plan. An angel appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." Joseph did exactly as the angel said. They ran away to Egypt, and they stayed there until the day Herod had died.